Hello and welcome to another Ben Listering conversation. As you know, each week I have different guests to chat about their life story and career, and this week's guest has taken us to the west in Wales, and it's the one, the only. He's worked on stations such as Bro Radio, Valleys Radio, RNIB, Connect Radio, and it's the one, the only Steve Powell. Hello, Steve. Welcome along.
Hello, Ben. Thank you very much for having me.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Very good. That's good. We're here to chat about radio, so I'm just going to shut up and let you talk. Where did it begin for you?
Well, it all started for me, like so many other people, I suppose, with hospital radio back in 1981 at a station called Radio PYF at Abergavenny in South Wales. It was a psychiatric hospital, and the radio station was seen as part of the therapeutic treatment, I suppose, for the patients. So, we provide them with music, with news, and with all sorts of things, which was quite popular, actually. And that station later on in life went to 1287 AM. So it was broadcasting across Abergavenny on medium wave. And I was still at the station when I was doing some work with the BBC, doing traffic and travel and whatever, which I got into later on in life. But I was at the station at Abergavenny when I was presenting my afternoon show, and the phone rang, and it was the station manager from Valleys Radio, Tony Peters. And he was listening to the station coming down the heads of the Valley Road between Ebervale and Abergavenny, asked me who I was and could I provide him with a demo tape to start presenting programs at Valleys Radio, which I did. And within about 2 weeks or so, I was presenting Drive Time at Valleys Radio. And I then progressed to the mid-morning show. And from then, I eventually went to breakfast, and I was there for about 9 years. But many years before, actually, sort of when I was still at hospital radio, I went to New York for a holiday. And next door to the hotel, I was staying at the Empire Hotel, which was just off Central Park, actually. And I went into the station because I wanted to look around. 11 Alive was the name of the station. It's no longer there, actually. It's more of a television station now than a radio station. And I was in reception, and I was talking to this girl on reception when this door opened behind the reception desk, and this guy appeared and said, where are you from? What part of England are you from? Because, of course, the Americans, they always see the UK as England. And I said, no, I'm actually from Wales in the United Kingdom. He said, Wales. He said, what part of England is that? I said, no, it's the United Kingdom. England is just part of it. So I gave them a bit of an educational journey whilst I was in the reception area. And anyway, he said he was doing a program. He liked to do a program, and he liked my voice at reception. And he said that I want to do a program playing club mix music from the UK and Central Europe, the likes of Modern Talking, Sonita, all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, I'd love to. He said, can you do a demo tape? I said, well, I'm here on holiday. That might be difficult. So he sorted me out with that one. He used one of the studios at 11 Alive, and we did a demo tape. And I was there then for 6 weeks presenting a program called Night Beat on 11 Alive in New York. And that was part again of my journey at the very beginning. I was very lucky, actually. There's not many presenters who can say that they walked into a radio station in New York and sort of started presenting programs there. So it was, I was very, very lucky. I had to sort out a visa and all sorts of things because I was staying there for 6 weeks to do this program. And then when the program ended, he said, would you like to come back and do more? But of course, being in New York and me being in the UK, or should I say England, in Wales, it was a little bit difficult. So it didn't really come off. But after Valleys Radio, we're moving on quite progressively now. I then went to Bro Radio at the Vale of Glamorgan in Barry, the home, of course, of Gavin and Stacey. The station were asking for a station manager. And I thought, well, this sounds interesting because I'd done some work with GTFM as well in Pontypridd. And I was there when that station opened, and I knew the guy who put the station on air, and I know how difficult it was, and it's a heck of a challenge. But I went to Bro Radio, and there was absolutely nothing there apart from a few bits of equipment. So I had to get the news service sorted. We had to get the transmitters in place with the directors, obviously, who had knowledge of other people who could do this for us, and they got them involved. But I had to guide the whole process. So I put Bro Radio on air in about 29, I think it was, from scratch. And a very proud moment, actually, when we went on air. And, I had to get volunteers involved. I had to get presenters trained up. I went to the BBC because I was doing traffic and travel. I went to the BBC and I asked a lady who was in news there, and I'd asked her, could she get involved to train the news team? The BBC agreed to that. So I got her involved to do that. And then we went on air. Then about 2 weeks later, I only had 2 weeks to get the station on air because they'd had the license for such a long period of time that you only got a certain amount of time to get the station on air. And I think I had 2 weeks left in which to get that station on air. If I didn't, the station would have had the license taken off them, and it just would not have happened. I then went from Bro Radio because I thought I've done enough in this station now. It might be time to move on and give somebody else a chance to take the helm, which I did. And a guy called Gareth Sweeney then took on the station, and he was a friend of mine who'd been in hospital radio with me actually at Abergavenny. I knew him quite well, so he took the station on. But I went to Insight Radio, which is now called Connect Radio, and that is a station, of course, run by the RNIB, and it is for people with sight loss. And so I took on the station as the Wales producer, so producing news items for the network, which of course was in Glasgow, is the head office. So I had to pop up there occasionally to do some bits and pieces. But the station is very successful, going very well today as well. So I've been delighted to have been part of success stories over the years as well, which is quite pleasing.
Nice. And what was it like working in Wales, and what was it like starting out at the BBC?
Well, everybody loves to or would love to work at something like the BBC. So when I was given the opportunity, I was absolutely delighted. Just walking through the front doors and into reception, knowing that you're part of this amazing organisation. And I was tasked with traffic and travel for Wales. But I also did BBC Bristol and Somerset. I also did BBC Gloucester, BBC Wiltshire, and I also did Digital News Network as well, which looked after the Severn Estuary area. And I also did Devon and Cornwall as well, BBC Devon and Cornwall. And that was really interesting because it was great to get to know all these people from this wide area across the southwest, Wales and the southwest. It was an amazing experience for me. And I also did some traffic and travel for the bigger stations as well. There's one station has completely left my mind at the moment, but Talk Sport. That's right, I did Talk Sport as well. So I did a few of those bigger stations as well as part of this, the commercial radio network. But working in Wales, and I mean, it's a great area to work anyway. The culture, the language. I don't speak Welsh, but if you do speak Welsh and you do get to work in somewhere like Wales, then more avenues open up, particularly at BBC Radio Cymru, the Welsh-speaking element of BBC Radio Wales. And of course, you also got television as well, such as S4C, areas such as that, which of course is exclusively Welsh. But if you can speak Welsh language, then it opens up a lot more areas, a lot more doors.
Nice. And what was it like working at Clyde Cymru on Central Street in Cardiff?
Um, can you repeat that question for me, Ben?
What was it like working at BBC Clyde Cymru at Central Square? I
Oh,
apologise
yes.
for Central Street, Central Square, opposite the
That's
train
okay.
station.
Yeah, it is right outside, actually. Of course, it's a new build. It's an amazing building. So I've been for a few interviews there recently, actually. I wasn't at Central Square when I was working at the BBC. I was working at Llandaff, the television centre at Llandaff, which was an old building. And the reason that had to close was because the back end of the building was actually sinking into the ground. But I believe it's now a housing estate. But the new building, Central Square, is very much smaller than the main BBC building that was at Llandaff. Of course, they do have television studios at Central Square, but the setup is very much different to what it was at the BBC at Llandaff. The radio stations are small, and not so many radio stations at Central Square. And of course, the staffing levels have been cut as well. There's not the same amount of people working at Central Square as there was at Llandaff, but the buzz was incredible there, and the atmosphere was electric.
Nice. And did you get to meet anybody famous on your travels when you were there?
I mean, you saw the everyday faces of BBC Wales who presented the news programmes. You saw some of the team from Pobl Cwm, which is the Welsh soap opera. And you would get people coming in. The comedian called Max Boyce would be there very often. So would you'd also see his name has gone completely out of my head at the moment. You would also see people who were visiting the studios who would be on the larger programs and the more network programs that the BBC would network into. You'd see some of those occasionally. You'd see politicians in and out. You'd see all sorts of people. Business people, people who were well known in Wales and elsewhere. So you would see a lot of people. But when you actually worked in that environment, like I would see Jamie Owen, the news presenter, very often, and you'd walk past him in the corridor. But where will you probably get a lot of people running after him for autographs? Because you work together, you were all colleagues, and that sort of thing just doesn't happen. You just get on with your work and just mind your own business.
Did you ever get to meet Gio Compero in that building?
No, I didn't. No.
The legend that is Mr. Wyn Evans.
No, I didn't get to meet Wyn Evans. I mean, I know of Wyn, and he was in the building when I was in the building, but our paths never really crossed. Which it's a very large place, and that happened, on a daily basis. You'd hear people maybe somewhere, but you'd never actually see them.
Yeah. And what was it like being in charge of Bro Radio, and where did you go next after all that?
That was a challenge, Bro Radio, but it was great. And for a first-time station, I mean, it was a community station, but it was a great community. The area of Barry, as you probably know from Gavin and Stacey, it's an amazing place to work. And we had a lot of work to do there as well, and we got involved with the community in a big way, with the police, fire, the rescue services, the RNLI, all sorts of organisations, and of course, because Gavin and Stacey made Barry famous, we were quite proud to be part of that as well. But Bro Radio was an incredible experience, and one that I will never forget. Very much hard work, but when I went on air for the very first time, from 2 weeks ago, when I just walked into that door and there was absolutely an empty shell, and then the station is on air. It's an amazing feeling because you've done this. It's you that have put this station on the air. It's an incredible feeling. incredible experience, and some amazing people and volunteers I worked for whilst I was at the station. And we had a great panel of directors as well. One was Clive Silver, who used to work at HTV, the old HTV before it became ITV Wales. HTV was based in Cardiff, obviously, and he was one of the editors there. And Clive had a load of experience that he could bring to the station, and he's got a very big media company in Woking, just outside London as well, which is very successful. So because he and I had a lot of knowledge with regard to broadcasting, we worked quite well together and helped shape the station, I think, from start to finish.
Nice. And what was your last gig in radio?
My last gig in radio was a short stint at GTFM in Pontypridd. I worked with a presenter at Valleys Radio called Gareth Williams, and Gareth was at GTFM, and he had to go to, he was actually working at the BBC at the time as one of the tour guides, and he was working at the Royal Welsh Show in mid Wales. So I covered him for the day, and that was my very last gig in radio. But I'm not sure if you're aware, back in 2022, whilst I was doing some work with the Welsh Ambulance Service, I lost my sight. It's not gone completely. I have some sight, but that has curtailed my ambitions in radio. I'd love to go back and do some stuff. Maybe even BFBS, because when I was in the British Army in the late 80s, I did a stint with a radio station called Radio Bosanski Petrovac in Bosnia, because I was there for a 6-month tour of duty. And that was part of an arrangement with British Forces Broadcasting. So that might be something I might be looking at in the not too distant future, getting back into broadcasting through BFBS, but we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's brilliant. And do you enjoy listening to the radio these days? And what radio stations do you listen to nowadays?
I do listen to BBC Radio Wales occasionally. Unfortunately, my opinions of radio and television today aren't very good. I don't know what's happened to radio or television, but we're seeing the same old faces, hearing the same old voices day in, day out. And the professionalism seems to have gone downhill slightly. I don't know what has happened. I really don't know. I'd love to find out. Love to do a bit of research on that as well. But I do like listening to music. I like. I've got an eclectic interest in music, all sorts. I like reggae as well, in fact. But I will listen to BBC Wales very often. But I sort of steer away from other radio stations. I get very frustrated and quite annoyed at some of the things that I hear.
And you have to give Nation their respect.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, Nation, actually, we had one of the guys from Nation come and visit us at Pro Radio, come and have a look around. I can't think of the guy's name at the moment. But Nation Radio, in all fairness, have done incredibly well. They really have.
And they've had stiff competition from other failed radio stations in the area. We're not going to go into that.
They have indeed.
And they've had their critics. And we're not going to name them because we don't want to end up in a courtroom.
No, that's right. Yeah, but they've done incredibly well. I've got a lot of respect for Nation, in all fairness.
Me too. And what was it like being on the radio? And what's it like listening to the radio with partially sight? Do you imagine the DJs and stuff?
Well, working in radio, it's a privilege. To be working in television or radio is a great privilege. I'm not one of those sort of person. I'm not an egotistical person, which unfortunately there are a lot of those out there at the moment. I respect the listeners, and your listeners, of course, they're not just listeners, particularly with like Valleys Radio, which is a very close knit community. They become your friends. Your listeners will phone you up, and their names. You get to know a lot about them as well, and you show them a lot of respect. I used to show my listeners the respect, and I used to love to do outside broadcasts, particularly with Valleys Radio, because we go into the Valleys towns of like Aberdare, Merthyr Tydfil, Ebervale, all those sort of areas, and you would get to meet your listeners. They come up to you, and there's their face in front of you, and you recognize their voice from the telephone. And sometimes you go somewhere in shops and whatever, and somebody will recognize your voice, and that's an amazing feeling. As I say, it's a privilege. It really is. It's a wonderful experience to be working in radio. It's a great medium. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit like if I walk into a pub wherever I am and they say, "Oh, I recognize your voice from this show," obviously.
Yeah, yeah. I was in B&Q once in a place called Cwmbran, which is just north of Newport in South Wales, and I was at the checkouts, and all of a sudden this voice, this voice said, "Are you Steve Powell?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh shit, I recognize your voice from the radio." And this isn't an area that was covered by but by Valleys Radio anyway. But she was from Ebervale, and she was obviously gone down to B&Q in Cwmbran to do her shopping, and she recognised my voice. I thought that's wonderful. It's a lovely feeling. It really is.
Brilliant. It's brilliant and nice. And what track is your guilty pleasure? And what track would you chuck in the big dustbin of doom as well? And what's been your biggest interview?
Um, interview. I've interviewed several of the team of EastEnders a few times. That was great. I interviewed. Who did I interview from EastEnders? I'm terrible with names. I really am. Absolutely terrible. But I got to interview some of the Carry On team of the old Carry On films. Kenneth Williams I interviewed once.
Barbara Windsor.
Barbara Windsor, yes, that was the name I was thinking of. Barbara Windsor, she was absolutely delightful. She really was. She was absolutely wonderful. A lovely lady.
She didn't tell you to get out of a pub then?
No, she didn't tell me to get out of her pub. I think it was at Elstree. I actually interviewed her. We went down to Elstree.
Nice.
I interviewed Patrick Moore, the Sky at Night. Went down to his house in East Sussex. That was a lovely evening. That was a beautiful thatched cottage he has down there. Very cluttered, but it was lovely. Of course, he's no longer with us, unfortunately. He's departed us, but a lovely man. And it was we had some very funny moments down there as well.
Was the person from Nation who came to visit your Bro Radio when you were down there, Steve Wiggy Wiggins?
No. Steve did do some stuff with us on Bro Radio. In fact, he did the breakfast show for a while with us. I know Steve anyway. When he was at Real Radio, I know Steve, and I asked him to come to Bro Radio. I asked a few people to come to Bro Radio, actually, who I'd worked with in the past to present some programs at Bro, and I was delighted that Steve said yes, and he came along and did some stuff with us, which was really good.
And I was in Barry with him a couple of weeks ago.
Right. Well, we were based next door to the police station in the YMCA building. That's where we were based.
We went up near the car wash. And we went
Oh, I
down
know. Yes.
to the old Gavin and Stacey complex, and we went down to Barry Island as well.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. We did a few outside broadcasts down there on Barry Island as well, for Grow Radio, which was really good.
Have you ever got to meet any of the Gavin and Stacey people?
No, they were going to use Bro Radio. They were going to use Studio 2 because we had two studios at Bro Radio. We had three studios actually, but they were going to use Studio 2 because they were going to shoot something in the program where they were going to be on community radio, and they were going to use one of our studios, but that actual scene didn't come off. So they didn't do it in the end, which was quite a shame because it would have been great to have had them on board for a while.
And very soon, I have to admit, I've got a real legend coming on very soon. This show.
Right.
Simon
Are we allowed
Parkin.
to ask who that is?
I just
Oh,
said
sorry.
Simon Parkin. Whoops, I just said that in front of the
Oh, right.
listeners. Whoops.
Oh, lovely. Well, that should be great.
The legend that is Simon Parkin from
Yes,
children's TV.
absolutely. Yes.
And was
Yes.
it real? And he commented on my picture with Wiggy that I had on the
Oh,
cliffs
right.
of Barry.
Right.
It's a beautiful set of coastline, Barry Island.
Yes.
And the radio landscape in Wales is still alive.
It is indeed. Yes. Yes. It's died in many places.
In the
but
UK,
in Wales, it's
in
still very
England, it's
vibrant.
dead
Yeah.
completely. But in Wales, it's
Yeah.
still thriving.
It is indeed. Yeah. And I think, to be honest, a lot to do with that is because of the Welsh culture.
Yeah.
Because we are a very close-knit community. And I think that shows itself in radio as well.
Yeah. I agree with
we
you.
we all know each other. It's a small industry in Wales.
I agree with you. And what advice would
we all know each other. We've all heard of each other.
What would you say to your 10-year-old self?
What would I say to my 10-year-old self?
Yeah. And where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
In 10 years' time, well, I hope I'm still fit and well, and hope that I might be indulging in radio a little bit. When I was a 10-year-old, I actually, when I was about 10, I used to record stuff on cassette tape as if I was doing a radio show. I would mimic news, and I'd go out and get some news stories. And I was just 10 years of age. I actually shot a documentary when I was 15 years of age for the Search Film Competition on the BBC. I did a film with Gwent Fire Brigade. They're not Gwent Fire Brigade now, they're South Wales Fire and Rescue, but they were Gwent Fire Brigade at the time, and I actually shot that in Super 8 sound back in 1975.
Nice. Brilliant. And what advice would you give
but
to
as
them?
a 10-year-old, I'd be encouraging myself as a 10-year-old. You know, I know how interested you are in radio and the media, and how you used to watch television, and I used to understand how things were done technically on television. And I'd say as a 10-year-old, you know, pursue that career. Keep going.
Yeah, brilliant. And what advice would you give to the next generation of radio people?
Next radio people, I would say, look, if you're thinking of going to radio and television, please just be your natural self. Don't try and be something that you're not, because the listeners, they know straight away. And you'll do yourself a favor by just being natural, enjoying what you do, and ensuring that you don't let it go to your head and that you become a different person. Just be yourself and enjoy it, and you know, be nice to everybody basically in the industry, because it's a cutthroat industry. It's very competitive, but just be nice to everybody and encourage all the people that you know who want to be doing what you're doing.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for joining me
It's been an
today,
absolute
Steve.
pleasure.
Do
I've
join me
enjoyed it.
again
Thank you
soon
very
for
much.
another Ben Listerine conversation. But for now, this will be available in full as a podcast and the best bits on Ben Listerine Conversation, the Ben Listerine Conversation radio show. Do join me again, same time, same place next time. But for now, I'm sick of saying it. That's a wrap. I'm back to the studio. Be all out. Bye bye.